Hey, Kennesaw Happenings. We want to welcome our listeners to a special podcast. So Larry and I, we talked earlier. We weren't sure coming into the studio or do it over Zoom. So he's over Zoom. He's in his location over desktop. And so we want to have Larry introduce who he is, what he does, and who he serves out there. And then we'll have a good conversation with him. Okay, Larry. Tell our viewers.
Well, name's Larry Grawey, pastor Kennesaw Family Life Church. My wife and I founded it about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. We've lived in the Kennesaw area for 18 years and just have a passion for this area. Early 2023, we bought a franchise in Dream Vacations. Mm-hmm. So we are travel agents. They don't use agents anymore. Travel advisors, travel specialists.
Yeah.
Business that we started earlier this year. So we're getting that off the ground. And I also do a lot with the city of Kennesaw. I'm the lead chaplain for the Kennesaw Police Department.
Okay.
Do the announcing for most of the city events, the 5K series, the race series, the movie nights. We really have a passion for the city of Kennesaw and do a lot with the city, with the Parks and Rec department and the city as a whole. I think that kind of sums it up. Got 3 amazing kids and an awesome wife. My wife and I have been married 28 years,
okay.
Jennifer. And then I've got a daughter that's 23, getting married this next summer. And I've got a 21-year-old son and a 19-year-old son. So I think that gives you a nutshell of my family and who we are and what we do.
Well, I can kind of, as you describe the dynamics of your family with your oldest getting married, weddings aren't free. And so they do cost a couple dollars. And most pastors that I know don't get into being a pastor because it gets them financially rich. I mean,
really?
There is a rich part of it, but I think it's not necessarily the financial end. So tell us a little bit about starting the church. I mean, that seems 10 years. You've kind of got through those first couple years. What do you feel our viewers would understand if you had to take them on that journey?
That's a loaded question, Pete, and I'll tell you why. We're not your average typical church. Mm-hmm. And to put it in the context, when I spent several years in foster care. I have a master's degree in child protection, juvenile justice. Now, through all this time, through 28 years, we've been pastors our entire career. Okay. But either youth pastors or even in working in foster care. But we felt like God specifically moved us from Central Florida to Kennesaw for Kennesaw, and that He had called us to pastor a community, not a church. And so our philosophy of ministry is 90 to 95% out, and only less than 10% of our efforts go into our Sunday mornings. And so our Sunday morning gathering is more like a home church. We meet in a coffee shop here at Kennesaw Coffee. It's very simple. We preach through books of the Bible. But what we do is we put ourselves out into the community. That's how I've been involved for so many years with so many different things, including the Kennesaw Teen Center. We adopted several years ago a local extended stay, and we partnered with a ministry called Forever Fed, and we do a monthly food pantry that feeds approximately 60 to 70 families a month. And the only place we advertise is the extended stay. It's about a mile from here, not even that far. Mm-hmm. We started with Budgetel that burnt down a few years ago, and some really great stories that came out of that. But for Kennesaw, especially a few years ago, most of the homeless population would be found in extended stay hotels. We didn't have a lot of homeless that lived in tents like you would see as you get closer to the city. It's changed a little. So we really strove to hit the families that were there as far as caring for them, loving on them. So we serve our community. The people that come to our church Some of them don't have a lot. We have just a mixture. But what God has really allowed us to do is to branch the business community with the needs. And the people that serve at our events are business leaders and people from our community, people from North Cobb Rotary. North Cobb Rotary is one of our largest partners.
Mm-hmm.
And we link the needs of the community to those that can help meet those needs. And that's really a big part of what we do. It's more about being out and serving. And that's really our philosophy. I'll put it this way, and I know this just from God never called us to start churches. He called us to make disciples. And so basically we want to do life with people and
Yep.
love on people, invite them in our homes and hang out. That's the nutshell.
I love it. A friend of mine, I've known her for 25 years. She sent me a text and she goes, "Here's my new business coach." And I just kind of assumed that it was a business coach. And it was a gentleman that really was challenging people that in the church today, walking through those doors is a little intimidating for a lot of people. So he was saying the church is your business. It's out in the community. So he was challenging business people to really embrace their faith and get out there and just practice what Jesus would want us to be like in the community, in our business and what we did. And it was like, I opened it up with the mindset, oh, well, let me see what Barbara's up to. And then this guy was preaching, he was talking about the commitment to business and how God laid on his heart to really push into business and really kind of get outside of the four walls of a church and get into the community. So when you did that, did you wind down your foster care and then kind of start the quote unquote church that you're currently pastoring?
So I had stepped away from foster care a couple of years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And when we moved here from Florida to Georgia, foster care wasn't on my radar at that point. But I worked with a pastor over by Laster High School in East Cobb who was heavily involved in foster care. And I actually started working at a boys' home, Mountaintop Boys' Home, with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we all left there, and he started Cornerstone Family Services, which would later become Faith Bridge Foster Care. You may have heard of it, maybe not. It's one of the largest child placement agencies in Georgia today.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were a part of the foundation of Faith Bridge. Now, that's all awesome. But what it was doing to my family personally, I was working 90 hours a week
Mm-hmm.
in my car. And so my kids were young. It was very demanding. I was doing my master's degree during that time. And we got to a point where we knew we were coming to start a church, but we couldn't keep doing what we were doing.
Okay.
And I needed that time. I needed that time to see people from a different light,
Mm-hmm.
to break out of the Christian bubble and to realize that people go through a lot of stuff and they're people.
Yes.
And they don't have to fit into our little world. Actually, our little world oftentimes is like what Jesus talked about with the Pharisees. We have a lot of great rules that we don't follow ourselves, but we expect everybody outside of us to follow.
Yep.
And criticize them when they don't. And it really broke that bubble for me and helped me to see people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was key to do the ministry that we do now with the extended stays as a police chaplain, to see people from a different perspective and remember that everybody's welcome at the table. They may not be where we want them to be, but that's not our job. Our job is to welcome them to the table and help move them along that journey, whatever that looks like. And that foster care time helped us to do that. So I took a couple of years off. We took about 18 months and just went to a church and healed. Just sat and wasn't in charge of anything, just worked jobs and healed for a little bit before we came back and said, okay, now it's time to start raising funds and start our church. So
that's it's interesting. I like the time to kind of heal and just sit in the pew and just kind of absorb from the other side, because I've heard that a number of places that, you know, you're so involved in serving, it just you're so worn out that you need a break. It's kind of like the church I came from over in off of Mars Hill. They would go on, I think it's every 3 years, they would take 3 months off and sabbatical, just recharge the batteries and just get away with the family, because the demands on anybody that serves, you know, full time or even serves in a church can be very draining, because you're talking about people, and people, you know, there's just a lot of needs out there. And so people definitely can tap into your energy. And if you're not strong, you know, you'll wear down as far as just physically and mentally. So I'm curious, when I met with your involvement with the police and being the chaplain there, over the last 5 years, you know, we've seen what has happened across the country, and kind of the challenge that police forces are being faced with finding and, you know, motivating and just getting their people that the kind of respect that sometimes they didn't have 20 years ago. What are you seeing in the last couple of years? Because it seems like on the outside, and I know a few people from Kennesaw, they don't feel the burden like some other police forces. Do you see anything different about Kennesaw?
Kennesaw is unique. I think we have an amazing police force. Chief Westenberger has set a culture in Kennesaw that's very good.
Yes.
And over the years, he has developed a really good reputation in our community. Now, at the height of those things with George Floyd, all that was going on, was there tension? Absolutely. There was a lot of things around downtown Kennesaw, and it's tied to the Civil War, and, you know, a lot of the history that was there that created some tension. And then with the university nearby, but it was handled well. And things always went through the police department, even if there was going to be protest or anything like that. And there was always a healthy police presence. And we had some great officers that interacted and handled that well. Now, something that Chief did early on was put together a citizen advisory council. Couple of the people, they're business leaders and pastors from the community, from the Black community specifically. Rod Green, good friend of mine. I don't know if you know Rod.
Yep.
One Church ATL. He's also one of our chaplains. Rod came on to that, and then others, and they really changed the conversation. And that's where, even out of that, for the last 3 years, we've had a Juneteenth event to help change the awareness of the police department and the Black community in Kennesaw. Very specifically, but Kennesaw has changed a lot demographically. And I think our police department has done a good job to try and stay at least with it, if not ahead of it, in how they handle it. And has it caused stress? Absolutely. Does an officer think twice when they pull somebody over? You know, what is this going to turn into? Right. Absolutely. But at the same time, we've also got a very good culture, and we have a very good department for that. So I think it's been very, as healthy as can be, I think, through that process.
Yeah, you mentioned Chief Westenberger, and, you know, I've known him for like maybe 5 years, run into him at KBA, run into him at different events. And he's so involved in the community, listening to the community, connecting with the community, and really having that connection that's different than a lot of people would think a police chief would have. And so it did reflect that, like, this has got to be different, and so it's cool to hear what your, thoughts were on that, because it does seem like they're different than others. So what would you say, like, so with your involvement with, it seems like the needs of the officers and the police force, are they coming to you with any different needs than they had years ago, with that pressure that kind of was imposed on them that they didn't see coming from a spiritual standpoint, maybe?
That's a great question. Really, I don't know that it's changed a little bit, but not a lot.
Okay.
The one thing you have to remember with officers is they carry a lot and have very few people that they feel safe to let that go with. That's kind of our job as chaplains. But I don't know that the tensions have changed that much.
Okay.
I think maybe the stress of being understaffed a lot. Most of our departments are understaffed.
Okay.
It's harder to keep officers. The private sector pays much better, and Kennesaw does a better job with retention because the culture of the department is good, and the culture of the community is good. They're well respected. But for those communities that it's not, it's hard to keep officers,
Right.
because they're like, man, I can go make more money somewhere and not be hated by everybody I see.
Right.
But I don't know that the issues have changed that much. I think they're still pretty much the same.
Right.
I think mental health, I will say this, across the board, whether it's officers or people in general, mental health issues are the highest thing I hear talked about. I sent this out to several pastor friends of ours. We're looking at some ways to impact our community, what the greatest needs are, working with several other pastors. And I sent out kind of a survey. And what I found from those pastors, two things. We feel like the homeless population in Kennesaw is rising, so the need there is rising. But the number one need that pastors came back to me with was mental health. And I think you see it with the officers.
Right.
You see it in all areas. Since our time with COVID, the mental health concerns have been the highest. People have really struggled how to deal with emotions,
Right.
how to deal with all of the stuff of life. And we're seeing that becoming a bigger and bigger issue.
Yeah, it does. We had a guest on about a month ago, and Scott works with Youth Centric, and it's combining college and high school kids kind of together to kind of mentor each other. Because you remember, I mean, you're a little younger than me, but the idea, social media came on pretty quickly. And, as your oldest is a girl, when people would get invited to parties, you never knew what a party was, but now they're streaming it live, and it's like, Susie's having this party, and, I didn't get invited to it. And so there's that pressure on girls and guys too, that everything is so in our face with our phones and with social media that there's nothing really hidden. It's just out in front. So it puts a lot of pressure on teenagers that everybody wants to fit in. I don't care who you are. You don't want to be the outcast. So when you don't get invited to something, you're thinking, well, what happened? Did I make somebody mad? And so then that pressure begins to build within the kids of today. So what would you say, like, as a pastor, are you seeing like things with the youth more than they were 10 years ago?
With the youth, Yes, differently.
Okay.
And there's a change in our culture. It's good and negative, as most things are. Talking about your mental health issues is much easier. I think our youth have more open doors to say, hey, I'm struggling with something, I'm doing something, that there's less stigma around that. But at the same time, the other side of that is there is a lot of labeling and coming in and saying, well, I'm ADHD, I'm bipolar, you could list out the things, and then we've created identities around diagnosis. And sometimes kids attach themselves to diagnosis that weren't even really there, or they become codependent on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just with anything in life, there's a give and take to it and a balance. And so there's a lot more of those mental health issues out there. There's a lot more ability to talk about it and to get help for it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there is, just like anything else, abuses of it, in the sense of, creating codependency and other issues that are out there. But we are seeing it. We deal
Gotcha.
with it a lot in our church, and that's a lot of the people that God has brought us over the years are people that have struggled with different things,
Mm-hmm.
or have been hurt by the church or other things. So we deal with a lot of mental health issues, quite a bit. So, yeah.
Well, that's why that. Well, I'm just going to guess, and I'll ask you the question. Travel is always fun, and putting, with your travel business with your wife, what has that done to impact both of y'all's mental health? Because, when you're putting travel plans together and going to see some of these places, that's kind of a nice thing. Has that helped you in any way, or tell our viewers what that's like?
Well, it depends on which end of it you're looking at. When you're looking at it from the financial side and going, okay, we've invested into this business, we've got it's a plan to help us to make money in the future to fund ministry. It also goes back to our why. Everything that we do is to help people. And so from a financial side, it's a 2-year runway to make money in travel, because we can sell travel today, but we don't get paid for it until it's either paid off or they actually take the trip.
Oh, okay.
So you're not making that money for a year or 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. So that side can be somewhat stressful. But the thing that we love about travel, and I like to make the scriptural joke, whenever Jesus wanted to retreat, he went off in a boat and prayed. He'd pull away from everybody. We love cruises. My wife and I have been doing it for years, with our kids and without.
Okay.
And it was the one place that we could go and disconnect. I'd even tell our church, look, if the world blows up while I'm on a cruise, it's fine. I'll find out when I get back.
I love that. Yeah.
So, because, and my kids knew it too, because we would ask them, hey, grandparents live by Disney. We can get Disney passes this year. We can do a cruise. Hey, let's do a cruise. Why? Because mom and dad, when they stepped on a ship, disconnected. They weren't pastors anymore. They weren't. If I go to a beach, or if I go to a mountain retreat, and I love the mountains, if I go to a beach somewhere, unless I just completely throw my phone away, I'm still can be reached.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this allowed me to totally check out. And so over the years, we've always taken people with us. And it wasn't that we were trying to get away from people. We were getting a change of scenery and just to check out. Mm-hmm. And so we loved helping people do that. And we loved helping people find ways to do it effectively. And then over the years, we've kicked the tires on doing something like this. And we planned for a cruise this past January, and just felt like, I need to look at this again. And so I started doing the research, and that's when we found Dream Vacations, which is one of the largest franchises in the nation for selling travel. We're nearly at 2,000 franchises now.
Wow.
And they did, I don't know how many as a whole, World Travel Holdings, something like $1.9 billion in sales this year.
Wow.
So travel industry is really big. We love to help people. If we're going to sell something, and I don't like sales, I'm terrible at it in the selling sense. But if I'm going to sell something, I want to sell something that's going to bring somebody joy.
Yeah.
So to help people with travel has been a great resource for us. I don't know if this is answering your question, Pete, but it's something that's really brought us joy in helping people find that right vacation. People will call us and say, "Hey, we saw this and it was this price and it looked great, but we've never traveled before." And we can say, you know what? We had friends that were looking at a cruise, and it would have been their first one, and the culture of the cruise line that they were looking at, the price was good, but the culture would have been terrible for them. Mm-hmm. None of the things they like to do to this cruise line do. And I said, you know what? I've got this cruise line over here. It's $500 difference, but it will have everything that you want to do. And they chose that second cruise line because it fits their family. It brought them joy. It's going to be a great experience. I love to help people do that. And you know what's cool about it is they're not paying me. I'm getting paid by the cruise lines.
Right.
I'm getting paid from them, so I can just help somebody without any strings attached and get a chance to bring some joy to their life. So the two go hand in hand. And I'll throw one other thing. I've noticed, because I'm also involved, with Kennesaw Business Association, where we met. And then I'm also involved with the Marietta Business Association and networking groups. As a business owner, it's also raised the level of our church, because people that I communicate with and business owners, as we sit down and talk, inevitably they ask me questions, not only about our business, but also about what we do with our church. And some have been serving at our food pantry and different. So it's brought awareness in bringing those two worlds together. And we see them working hand in hand. Again, business is ministry. I have meetings constantly with people concerning business that lead to friendships and spiritual conversations.
Right.
And the two fuel each other. So.
Well, it does. I haven't run into anybody like the dynamics of what you described. However, there's a gentleman who was in my men's group, and his wife, they went through an illness with their son. And so they got, through that over many years. And there was a lot of transformation that was going on in the family. But one thing that they did after that, they sat down and they said, okay, every Christmas we can add a few toys to your, toys, or we can go on experiences. And so they obviously chose the latter. So every time, whether it's a holiday, you're seeing them as a family vacationing and enjoying each other, and they just kind of curtailed all the gift giving and put it into the experience. And they said it was just wonderful, because now you're creating memories, and those memories, they don't come in a box and get thrown away or worn out. They're always with you. So, Jessica was on the show, and she just talked about that whole aspect of the experience. Have you seen the similar thing? How many years have you all been doing cruises together as a family?
We took our first cruise in 2001. Okay. Now, that was when our kids were really little. We had some friends that worked at Disney and took my wife and I on a Disney cruise. She was actually pregnant with our second. So we've been cruising off and on since then. But the exact same thing, and that's the reason. We've never made a lot of money. And there was a lot of repairs we needed to do on our house over the years. But we chose, instead of replacing carpet, to take a trip with our family and make memories. Even during COVID, one of the things that we did is we loaded up our van, and my daughter was a senior in college. We said, we don't know when we're going to get a chance to do all of us again. We loaded up and road tripped and did 6,000 miles in 10 days and went to national parks and went from here to up into the Badlands to a place where I take guys on motorcycles on a missions trip, to Grand Tetons, down to Salt Lake City, down to Arches National Park, through that whole area, and down, ended at the Grand Canyon and came back. Because we believe in making memories. You said exactly. Now I'll tell you, travel is up. The travel industries compare their numbers. 2019 was the highest travel time prior to COVID.
Really?
And so they compare their numbers to the 2019 numbers when they look at their numbers since COVID,
Right.
since the travel industry came back in. 2023 will surpass 2019 by 34%.
What? Holy mackerel.
Travel for cruising specifically, if you haven't booked for 2024 by now, good luck. Their 25 and 26 are opening up, and every ship is full. Prices are not lower. Actually, the cheapest time to get a cruise is when it first comes out. It will only go higher from there. The last minute deals are gone.
Really? I mean, if you're like flexible and you wait and it's the last week, I always thought you could be that flexible. You had some
prior,
but not necessarily.
Prior to COVID, yes. Now, that conference I was at a couple weeks ago, all the cruise leaders from every major cruise line, resorts were all on the ship with us. It was our annual conference, so we had every major cruise supplier there. They all said the same thing. Because what COVID did, exactly what you were talking about with your friend, people realized we're not guaranteed anything. Ooh. And that bucket list might need to happen now, not 10 years from now.
Okay.
And so they're putting that money into an experience. And experiential travel is on the rise, where people are spending more money to have experiences, guided tours through Africa, the river cruises through the Danube or wherever. And they're paying more money to do it because they don't know that they have tomorrow.
Wow. Interesting. I mean, it makes sense as you're explaining it, but I had no idea those kind of numbers. I mean, that's kind of crazy to compare the height of 2019 and then take us to 2023 and over 30% increase over that top number. Wow.
Yeah.
So what would you say? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it's not slowing down.
Yeah. And that makes sense now that you framed it that way. And I totally agree that COVID definitely got us thinking that, hey, tomorrow is not guaranteed. So that bucket list becomes more important than it was before. When you were like, you know, obviously loving cruising and traveling as a family, what attracted you to Dream Vacations when you guys were looking?
Three things, really. And I get this question a lot. One, the big thing is that it was plug and play. So it was a low cost entry as far as a business goes, a franchise. Mm-hmm. Now, I could have went out and spent $500-600 and became an independent travel agent. But what I would have had to have done is all of those suppliers that I saw, I'd have to call Royal Caribbean and negotiate my commission. Mm-hmm. I would have to call Carnival, negotiate my commission, Disney. Everybody would have to go negotiate my commission, set myself up, establish, get to know who they are, and then work on building my marketing and everything else. So as cheap as it would have been a lot of work, a lot of time, and frankly, I just don't have it. By doing a franchise, and there's a couple of them out there, all of that was done for us. Mm-hmm. We are top tier commissions for all the major suppliers, and we come in that out of the gate. And so our buy-in, we're buying that reputation, we're buying that name. Again, one of the top travel companies out there. And then the other side of that is our franchise does two things well. They recognize community heroes and veterans. They've made the top in their tier of business. They've been number one or number two as veteran-owned franchises in the country for a few years running. I think when we were at our conference, we had over 1,000 of our franchise owners there, and about 30% of them were veterans.
Wow.
And so a veteran gets a 30% discount off the cost of the franchise to buy it right up front. We were considered community hero, which is anybody that does public service, like police officers, teachers, nurses, doctors. They took us as pastor and saw the work that we did in our community and gave us a 20% discount as community heroes.
Okay.
And then we had 16 months of no franchise fees. And the franchise fees are low, but we get the first, to help us to get that business off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And we have tremendous support, tremendous. They manage our website. They they curate social media posts. We can do our own. They give us they have business development managers. There's just a ton in there. So the support, it's very family oriented.
Okay.
And even the owners of World Travel Holdings, it's a family owned business. They've been 41 years in the travel world. So that's kind of what drew us to those three things, the ease of coming in, the low cost, the discount, and then a very family oriented, love veterans, loved communities, and celebrate those things.
So, it seems like a natural fit. I like how you explained it, and really the benefits of being able to not establish those relationships, which takes a long time. You just don't click your finger and have Royal Caribbean coming, running after one person. But, as a franchise, they're looking at it obviously as 1,000 franchises with the clout and the reach in the marketplace. So when you're not pastoring and you're not booking cruises for people, what do you like to do for fun? And raising kids. I don't want to leave that off.
Fortunately, they're all adults now. My wife and I we're game players. We love to play games, and so we love to do that. It can be any variety of games. We don't limit it, tabletop, cards, whatever. We're big hikers and campers.
Okay.
Love the outdoors. I mountain bike 2 to 3 times a week. I run. Very just active people.
Yeah.
And that's what I love to do. And I know you love golf. I'll be playing golf Thanksgiving morning down in Fort Lauderdale. So,
I'm jealous.
Yeah, we'll be brother-in-laws and playing some golf. So, just very active.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. I know for yourself, being busy with everything you've got on your plate, you have a lot to do. So we'll wind down, but we always like our guests to give our viewers maybe an insight that you want to leave them with. So what would you share with our viewers? Oh, wait, before that, tell us how they can get a hold of you.
Well, you can get a hold of me a couple different ways.
Okay.
Obviously, we've got our different websites for Kennesaw Family Life Church, or thetravelhelpers.com is our travel website.
Okay.
Man, I give my phone number. I don't care. It's 770-548-3967 is my personal number. You can call me at that, and I'm happy to answer it. Email is very simple, larrygrawey@gmail.com, and get a hold of me any way that you want. I'm happy to drink some coffee and talk. And you
got some good coffee over there at Desktop. Is it called Kennesaw Coffee now?
Yeah, Kennesaw Coffee. So you have the two businesses, Kennesaw Coffee and Desktop Co-working,
Right.
and they're owned by the same guy, John Spellman. But yeah, yeah, drinking some of their coffee right now.
Uh,
So listen, I'll leave you with this.
okay.
If I would say anything, remember your why in what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, you see that we do a lot of things. There's a lot more that I do. I have several streams of income. I also run sound for a local theater group. Do a lot of different things, but all of those things are driven by one thing, my why, and that's caring for people.
Mm-hmm.
I love people. That's why God placed me on this planet. I love to have conversations with people. I love to sit down with people. I love to help people. And everything I do, from running a business to pastoring a church to announcing events for the city, is because I want to be around people and build relationships with people and bring them joy. And if I can do that, I'm doing what I was created to do. Everybody's got a why. Everybody's got a purpose in what they do. And whether it's their job, it doesn't matter if it's their job, recreation, or whatever it is. If you know your why, you can have that peace of knowing that what you're doing is accomplishing that.
Awesome. I would say it in golf terms. You just hit the driver right down the middle, about 300 with a fade. For our baseball players, you hit the home run. So
Yeah.
Those are two pretty good metaphors of what you delivered. But I want to thank you, Larry, for being our guest, and wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving down in warm country. I guess that Fort Lauderdale is going to be a little bit warmer than here.
That's the plan. That's the plan. So, Pete, man, I've had a blast. I really have enjoyed it. So thanks for having me.
You bet. Glad to have you.